Alright, it's time for episode review for American Horror Story Coven season finale episode, The Seven Wonders. Boy, I tell you what, that Ryan Murphy, I think that's the creator of the show. He's got, he must have a real hard-on for that Stevie Nicks. Used her again in the opening of the season finale here. And I gotta tell you, it was just, I mean, it fit, and it was kind of cool to see a little montage of how they were all preparing to take the test. But it was just kind of weird to see old Stevie Nicks' face, but hear her young Stevie Nicks' voice. It just didn't mesh well together for me. It just kind of seemed a little bit weird. And you know what? It turns out that Cordelia was the next Supreme after all. Was that way the entire time. She was just being held back, repressed by the terrible, worst mother in the world that was Fiona. And, you know, basically she couldn't even recognize that she had the power inside of her. At least until she got that little push from Myrtle in this episode. Now, before we had all that happen, you know, we had the actual Seven Wonders take place for the other witches, and I liked the test. I liked the way they executed it. I thought it was pretty cool. But let's talk about Misty Day for a second. So they took the test where they all had to travel into their own personal hell and then come back from it. Misty Day, she's unable to escape, and she's stuck in hell and dies. Her body turns to ashes. It's terrible, man. Terrible, awful way to go. Terrible, awful thing to happen. I liked the way the show portrayed her own personal hell. I liked how they did it for each person that they showed that for throughout the entire season. You know, that's pretty cool stuff. So, but then Misty dies. Okay, and everybody's all heartbroken about it, totally shocked that she just didn't make it back. But I tell you what, thank God that they cut to that commercial, because if they wouldn't have done that right after her death, there would have been about 15 to 20 seconds of mourning, of taking a minute, not even a minute, taking a few seconds to accept that loss before they're all like, hey, let's play a game of tag. Yeah! Well, I gotta take my mind off of this terrible, awful thing that just happened to one of our friends here. What are we gonna do? Oh, tag, you're it. Oh, tag, you're it. Oh, let's run around outside. Let's laugh. Let's giggle. Oops, I wound up on a pointy end of a gate. My bad. I'm dead too. Actually, Zoe teleporting onto the sharp end of that gate, not listening to Cordelia, and getting impaled was pretty cool. I actually did like that. But, man, that tonal shift. Right after Misty died, they were like, oh, let's go play a game of tag. That sounds like fun. It didn't even really make sense, because Zoe was like all serious about, yeah, there's nothing we can do. We got to continue. Okay, let's play tag. What fucking... It was just really, really kind of weird to shift so jarringly from feeling one way to going to having fun. It was just not the best way to go about it. Another thing I want to talk about is Madison. Boy, man, this chick can play a bitch really, really well. And in this episode, I mean, throughout the whole season, she's been pretty good at it. But in this episode, she brought her full-on super bitch. And it kind of culminated at the point where she could resurrect Zoe to prove that that she could pass that test, but instead she resurrected a fly. That was just mean. She's such a mean person. And I was just waiting for her to get hers, especially in this episode, man. They just kept building her level of bitchiness. And then to watch her crumble during that divination test when she knew she couldn't do it and she just basically fell apart. And then to have her get straight up murdered by Kyle, she had it coming. That bitch had it coming. And seeing Madison get taken out was great. Finally get to see her put down for good. But the problem I had with the scene was that they just got done showing, in this episode, all of the vast array of powers that she had available to her. And even a few seconds before the strangle scene, she was talking about how she had all these powers and she didn't need all these witches and she's going to go back out to being an actress. But then when it came down to it and her life was in danger and she was about to get killed by Kyle, all she did was cry and be scared. She didn't use a single one of her powers to try to save herself. I didn't really understand that. And maybe you could make the argument that he was strangling her so she couldn't focus, but there was one point where he wasn't strangling her at all. He was just like mounted her. but he wasn't choking her out at that one point. She could have defended herself then, but she didn't. So that seemed a little weird to me. But if you can ignore that, it was great to see her get what was coming to her. So at the very end of the episode, we had Fiona coming back. No big surprise. You could pretty much see that coming. But what you didn't see coming was what the confrontation was going to be like between her and Cordelia. And I like the makeup that they used for Fiona, for Jessica Lange, because she just looked decrepit and old, and it was very well done. And she was just so weak, she could barely walk, she could barely move. You almost felt sorry for her. Almost. And when she confronted Cordelia, she basically wanted Cordelia to kill her. But Cordelia was just like, no way. You have to just endure it. You gotta take it, and then you just gotta let go. And that's what happened right there in Cordelia's arms. It was a good scene between the two of them. I really liked it. So then you had Zoe and Queenie as the new counsel for Cordelia, and she makes the Coven public. She announces that, witches are here, we're here to stay, and we're looking to help any young witches out there that are afraid, don't know what to do with themselves. We're here. So it was a good way to end the episode, to end the season on a positive note. All right, so let me do my what I disliked about this episode the most first. The thing that I disliked about this episode the most was Myrtle Snow's death by fire at the stake again. This show, throughout this season, has had so many takebacks, so many reversals on things that seemed permanent that probably should have been permanent, but they kept taking it back and taking it back. And here, in this season finale, they actually had to almost duplicate the exact same scene that they had earlier in the season. That, to me, is ridiculous. I mean, when you're basically duplicating a scene like that, especially in your season finale, you know you got a problem. But what I really liked about this episode, my favorite parts, were the way they portrayed the personal hells for the characters. Obviously, Queenie we've seen before. Didn't see a whole lot of that in this episode. Didn't need to. But I'm talking about Misty Day was great, and especially Fiona, who it turns out she really did not want to go to that cabin with the Axeman. Not at all. In addition to that, I really liked the uber bitchiness of Madison. It was just like, all hail the new queen bitch at one point in this episode. And then she got taken down, failed, murdered. She had it all coming to her. So, overall, season finale, I'm going to give it a B. It was pretty solid. They closed off all of the major loose ends and storylines that they needed to close off, I felt. And, there were a couple of problems here and there, a couple of oversights, it felt like with Madison not using her powers, and the ridiculous sight of seeing the exact same scene that I saw earlier in the season with Myrtle being burned alive again. That was a little ridiculous, but other than that, it was pretty solid episode. Alright, so probably next week I'm going to be doing a review of the season, in general, just give you, what I've thought about it with storylines, characters, likes and dislikes, so you can keep an eye out for that. But other than that, it's JB Squared 61279 with an episode review, the final episode review for American Horror Story Coven, and I will see you guys next time.